there are going to be opportunities for you to learn and grow, and there are going to be different opportunities based off of what you are looking for post-fellowship. A lot of times it's within Michigan medicine too. So that was really cool to see.
Good evening, everyone. It's Prashangi Shah with the Fellowship Review through the American Journal of Healthcare Strategy. Being from Michigan, I am really excited to highlight today's fellow, Trent Garrett. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. We have so many great things to talk about. Your career journey has been so unique with all your experiences so far. But before we get into all those details, high level, tell our listeners who you are, where you're from, and a little bit about you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So, hi again. My name is Trent Garrett. I am a first year administrative fellow at Michigan Medicine. I grew up in Panama City Beach, Florida, and went to undergrad at the University of Florida, got my bachelor's in animal sciences. Um, Had a really hard pivot in a career and chose to go to UAB for grad school to get my MBA and MSHA. And now I am doing my fellowship with Michigan Medicine.
Love to hear it. And I feel like health management is one of those fields where people tend to pivot from other science type fields. So I don't think it's uncommon. But want to kind of zoom in a little bit on the graduate degree. You obviously have two graduate degrees. Overall, how was your experience at UAB? How did you feel the program prepared you for what was going to come next?
Yeah, so one of the hard sells for me with UAB was the fact that there was a dual program option. So coming from a very untraditional background, I had no finance or business classes or background with that. So I think that for me, it was really important to have some sort of fundamental basic understanding of those things. And so having that supplemented with my MSHA degree was really beneficial. And I think something specifically about UAB that also spoke to me was the fact that it is a 3-year program. So you have the 2-year didactic portion, which is common with most, if not all, MHA programs. And then the third year is the required 1-year fellowship. And so, though my fellowship is 2 years, the requirement is just 1 year of a fellowship. And so I knew that because there was a lot of intentional training and development within the UAB program, that was really crucial for my development as a healthcare leader.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, I think you might be one of the first Michigan medicine fellows, but you're definitely not one of the first UAB grads. And so I love to hear all the positive experiences that, you and your peers have had. It's obviously an incredibly reputable and strong program. So thank you for sharing that. Um, one of the other things that we like to talk about on this podcast are internships that people have had during their time as a graduate student. And I know we connected a little bit offline to highlight two of them, a patient care assistant internship role that you had, but then also your time at Press Ganey. So dive into that. Tell us kind of how you went about navigating each of those highlights from either or both that really stand out to you when you look back.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when I graduated from undergrad, I knew that I was very interested in human healthcare, straying away from veterinary medicine. So, I was interested in being a patient care assistant at UF Health to get clinical experience and understanding specifically each scope of different clinicians. So, whether it be nursing or PA or medical school, understanding the scope of each role before applying to programs was really important to me. And so, having that clinical experience, I had worked in the middle of the pandemic. And so, that for me unveiled a lot of systemic issues within healthcare that really ignited a higher level calling to catalyze some change in healthcare. And so, I had talked with some clinical leaders that I had been working with, and they had asked if I had considered health administration, and at the time I had no idea what that was. And so I got it. I know it was crazy. And like as I learned more about it, I had a better understanding of okay, this is really where my strengths are and where my passions are and what I'm
Sure.
really looking for in a career. And so that was really important to me. And so I got connected with some leaders at UF Health, and really fell in love with the idea of health administration. And that sort of, started guiding me to the path of, okay, exploring MHA programs. And that led me to UAB. And so with the UAB program, in between the first and second year, you have a required internship. And
Mhm.
so I, without having a lot of experience, I was pretty open to different opportunities. And actually, the president of consulting within Prestany had come to UAB, and because he had graduated from the doctoral program at UAB and was wondering if there would be a UAB student interested in the Prestany internship. And so I inquired a little bit more just because I've heard the name Prestany, but I wasn't sure how that really intertwined with consulting because that's not the vision that I had with Prestany.
Sure.
So I got connected with Charles Haygood, who's the president of consulting there, and we started talking more about what that would look like. It would look more like your standard consulting internship, and I think the more that I learned about it and having different experiences with different types of healthcare institutions would be really great for my learning. Um,
Yeah.
and that was truly what it was. So that summer, I worked remotely part time and then spent a lot of time on site with clients. So going, from academic medical centers to rural healthcare centers to safety net hospitals, like ranging the gambit, really understanding more about these different institutions, and really had just learned and grown a lot. And then, fortunate enough, there were some projects that I was working on that really expanded throughout all of Prestany. And so they asked me to stay on throughout the school year, which is really nice. So I was able to continue my internship through the school year and truly up to the week before my fellowship started.
Yeah, yeah. How cool. How cool is that? And I think, we talked about this a little bit offline, but I want to bring it up again just because I think oftentimes the traditional path for graduate students is to go to a health system or even consulting for their internship. So I think it's very cool that you got that consulting experience, but on the other side, through Press Ganey, an organization that so many hospital systems partner with and utilize. So I think how valuable is that? And to have the connection of someone who's such a senior leader within the consulting sector also, I think, want to call that out, that I'm sure that was very impactful for you as well. um so you touched on this a little bit. You said that because you went to UAB, the fellowship was required, and so I think that kind of made, like, the program in a way makes that decision for you. But tell our listeners, when it came to picking your sites, narrowing down your list, and staying on top of the very rigorous application cycle, how'd you do that? How did you manage, stay organized, manage your time, and just stay on top of every little component?
It is not easy. And anyone who says it's easy is either lying or I need to learn from them because that was a very stressful time. And I feel like most people can resonate. And yeah, it was hard. So I think for me, I really had to boil down to what is truly important to me,
Mm,
post graduation, and within a fellowship. So for me personally, I'm from the South. I was okay with exploring different options. But I know a lot of colleagues and friends who I graduated with where they wanted to stay in the South and stay closer to family. It's
sure.
really, what's important to you. And so what was important to me was having that learning and growth development mindset. And so with my experience with Prestany, experiencing a very wide range of different institutions, having that understanding that academic medical centers really drive forward that learning and development and growth mindset. So I was looking specifically for fellowship opportunities that really harped on that continuous learning piece. It was really important to me. And so I started doing my research and learning more that academic medical centers sort of were more in line with that like tripartite mission that I really fell in love with of the research, the education, and the clinical care. So learning more about that because I never directly worked in an academic medical center within the administrative space. So that was something that I was really looking forward to. So yeah, I attended a lot of webinars over the summer, really got to learn more about institutions through that, got connected with different fellows of different institutions. And it was a lot to juggle. I had a massive spreadsheet where I was, webinar dates, application timelines, like where these places would fall on a specific rank. And I think something that was also important to me was to only apply to fellowship opportunities that I would say yes to immediately.
Yeah.
Because there are so many different opportunities out there. And yes, it would be nice to apply to all of them, but it's just not feasible.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Great advice. And to your last point, 100%. What a great, I think, what a great perspective. Like, would you say yes to this place if they offered you a fellowship tomorrow? And if you can, without missing a beat, say yes, then you know that that's something you truly want. So I appreciate that little tidbit. And I know our listeners will as well. And so obviously you have to follow all the guidelines and make sure you have all the components of the application. But then the next step, interviews, right? There's first
Mhm.
round, oftentimes second round. Final round tends to be a full day's worth of interviews with former fellows, senior leadership, C-suite. Looking back, how was that experience for you? Anything that stuck out, or anything that you felt made you successful during interview season?
Yeah, I think something that is very telling for applicants is how authentic you really are. Of course, prepare. Please come to interviews prepared. But also be yourself, like be your true and authentic self, because that's truly where you're going to see the most fit. And that was something that I had heard a lot going through interviews, and, come reject, like getting your first rejection, it's hard to hear.
Yeah.
Um, but when you really feel that match, it makes sense. And that's something that I felt with Michigan Medicine coming on site. um, Something that I also had really considered when I was doing interviews was, when I was talking to current fellows at the time, are these people that I could see myself working with? That was really important to me. And so when I came to Michigan Medicine, all of the current fellows were just phenomenal, so personable, so intelligent and brilliant. And I just fell in love with the institution and just how authentic everyone came across and how detailed and intentional everyone was.
Mhm.
So I think, yeah, come prepared, but also be your authentic self. That's how you're going to know if people are going to hear this in the interview process a lot, like you are interviewing them just as much as the fellowship is interviewing you. And again, it's hard to hear because you're going through a very stressful time, but it's so true. And please, like, don't lose sight of that. It's really important to understand that you are also looking for what fits you and what you are looking to learn and grow in during your fellowship as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what great points that you made during that, and that point of, they're interviewing you, but you're also interviewing them. Not the first time it has come up, so you're absolutely spot on with that. I think, you want to make sure that it's the right fit for you, and it'll be a place where you'll be mentored and you'll be able to thrive. So I appreciate you highlighting that. Now for our listeners who are interested in Michigan medicine, let's talk about the structure of the fellowship. Is it 1 year? Is it 2 year? Tell us a little bit more about if you have co-fellows, if you have multiple or one, and then also just project based, rotation based, any other logistics that you'd want people to know.
Yeah, sure. So the Michigan Medicine Administrative Fellowship Program is a 2-year program. So the first year is project based, and there are no assigned projects that you get. The first 2 weeks of the fellowship, you get a list of submitted project proposals that have been vetted out by leaders, that states, the background of the project, what your scope would of the project would be, and then who your preceptor for the project would be as well, and how they would mentor you. So it's very strategic and very thoughtful in that sense. So it can range anywhere from clinic operations to faculty affairs to graduate medical education, just the whole gambit within Michigan medicine, what you're truly interested in learning. Um, and then the second year is what we call the immersion year. So the first year we call it the breadth of experience. where you have all of these different opportunities within Michigan Medicine, whereas the immersion year is the depth of experience. So you are embedded as a full time resource within one area or department within Michigan Medicine to really get that depth of experience. And sometimes that can look like an interim clinic manager role, or sometimes that can look like you working in the Department of Strategy. We've seen fellows go in all different directions, and it is cohort model. So we take up to 3 fellows a year. Um, and that was also something that I was really looking forward to, especially if I'm going to be moving after graduate school, that, I would have that support system as well of people who are understanding exactly what I'm going through and being able to have that camaraderie as well. Because that's how the UAB program was. We had a cohort model that was just so phenomenal, and I learned and grew a lot through that, and that was something that I wanted to continue growing in. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's sort of the high level overview of the
Yeah.
administrative fellowship. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you covered it really well. One thing that I didn't ask, but I will ask you to build off of your last answer. A lot of the reason why people do fellowships is access to mentors and really
Mhm.
senior leaders. So, talk to us about Michigan Medicine's approach to who your preceptor is. How do you get access to senior leadership, and how do you make those mentors, during your fellowship years?
Yeah, great question. So we have 2 executive preceptors and an executive sponsor. So we have the chief operating officer of the medical school that we meet with monthly individually as fellows. And then we have the chief operations and integration officer of the Michigan Medicine that we also meet with monthly individually. And then our executive sponsor is the chief governance officer, who was who was a previous president of the health system, who is still around and doing a lot of incredible work, especially within sustainability and governance, that we meet with quarterly. We also have a program director, Swati, who is a past fellowship alumni, and we meet with her typically about every other week, just to make sure that we're doing the things that we need to do to have a successful fellowship opportunity. And then access to other senior leaders. We are involved with staffing the upper leadership meetings every week. So that's all of the C suite executives of the health system. They all meet weekly to discuss the high priority topics that are happening. And then we also, with the administrative fellowship card, we call it, um, we can cold call or cold email senior leaders just to have coffee chats or one on ones, just to get to know them a little bit more. And because we're fellows, they're more than open to it. I usually try to schedule one about like one a week, one every other week with a new face, just to
Mhm.
meet them and get to know them and understand their background a little bit more. So we get a lot of exposure, which is another reason why I was I felt really called to Michigan Medicine, was understanding that you do get a lot of exposure and you get a lot of mentorship through that. And something that I had talked about earlier was with our projects, there is a detailed line of who your preceptor for that project is going to be and how they will mentor you through that project. And that was something really important to me too. Something else that I also didn't talk about earlier that I think is really important for my why for Michigan Medicine was the long-standing history of the fellowship.
Mm.
It's been around for decades, and so people are very familiar with administrative fellows, who we are. They are submitting project requests before we even start, because they know that they want a fellow working on their projects. And having that support is really great. And there are a lot of fellows who stick around too. So there's no standard trajectory of a fellow. It's truly, we call it sort of like a build your own path.
Yeah.
Learn and grow in the ways that you want to. And there are going to be opportunities for you to learn and grow, and there are going to be different opportunities based off of what you are looking for post fellowship. A lot of times it's within Michigan Medicine too. So that was really cool to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh, you said so many green flag things that I want to like re-highlight, but the fact that fellows stick around, the fact that there's decades behind the program, even the fact that you highlighted that people are requesting fellows, all great signs in my opinion. So, thank you so much for sharing that. Kind of one more question specific to your fellowship experience. any project or any shadowing opportunity that you've done, since you started, I think 8, 9 months ago, that really sticks out to you that you'd want to highlight, just to give our listeners an example of the type of experience a fellow may get?
Yeah, so there was a project that I recently rolled off of. We had implemented ambient AI documentation for providers. So we had 300 initial licenses for providers to use AI documentation for their patient visits.
Mm.
This is not something that the system has done before, but other systems have. And there has been, prior to this, there was a lot of conversation around AI. How do we use it? How do we especially using it to reduce administrative burden and cognitive loads, especially for our providers, because there's this thing called pajama time where providers are having to finish their notes after clinic. And, they're spending a lot of time at home finishing documentation because they're just like catching up and making sure that everything's wrapped up. And so it was really cool to be part of the team that was rolling out the first 300 licenses. It was a very aggressive timeline. It was first proposed to us as the implementation would be 6 weeks. And then going into the project, we were asked, hey, can we cut this in half? We said yeah.
Yeah.
So it was an aggressive timeline, but I think it was just because it was so needed, and you could tell it was received extremely well. There are some times, especially when working with faculty, that a lot of the projects that we do, they view it, or they can and have the opportunity to view it as something that they have to do, whereas this is something that is truly benefiting them and is truly for them. And you see the results immediately. So we had our 300 licenses updated, installed, and ready to go within a week.
Okay.
And we were receiving so much good feedback. And there's like some research teams who are still collecting data. I've since rolled off the project, but the sort of the emails and the messages that we were getting were, I get to go home and I get to have a date night with my partner, which I haven't done in
Yeah.
months. Or I get to go home and I get to read to my kids before bed. So it was really cool to see the direct impact that it had on our providers, because that was truly the goal, was to
Yeah.
reduce that time, reduce the administrative burden. And we're looking at potentially expanding those licenses to reach other parts of the institution. So that was a really big highlight of the fellowship so far for me.
I love to hear that. And I think, really brings to light the impact that two ways, right? The impact that you can have as a fellow on institutional goals and helping, I think it's important to have that work life balance so people aren't sitting at home working until 10, 11 at night. But then also, it highlights, in my opinion, also the impact on your own career. This is probably a project that you're going to think about as you move up, through the ranks at Michigan Medicine post your fellowship. So that, what a cool initiative, and I really appreciate you highlighting it. One question that's more, I guess, more fun, and really it gives my guests an opportunity to highlight what they like to do out of work, is, I preface this by saying that fellowships can require you to move cross country to a state you've never been, to a completely new environment. And of course, you moved around a little bit, so what about the Ann Arbor area? What about the area around Michigan Medicine do you love the most? What is something that prospective fellow candidates should know about Michigan?
Yeah, so coming from the South, it is a little cold. Um, but I did just survive the last bit of the harsh winter, so it's doable. One of the
Yes.
second year co-fellows, she's originally from Hawaii, so and she's doing fine. She's enjoying it, loving it so much. So don't let that dissuade you. But I think for me, something about Ann Arbor is the culture is just so beautiful. So something that I was also looking for when looking at a fellowship opportunity was geographically more in line with, is this somewhere where, people are accepted, or where I would feel accepted, or, if this is truly the best place for me. Not necessarily just the organization, but like if this is in line with my values as a person. And so truly Ann Arbor is just a welcoming community. That was something that was so evident. Just being able to build friends outside of work was really important to me, and I was able to do within a month or two. In terms of things that I enjoy doing, I love food. And Ann
Mhm.
Arbor has a wonderful food scene, but something that people don't also talk about as much, but is really cool is Detroit is not far away. I live about 40, 45 minutes away from Detroit, and there's phenomenal. Oh my gosh, the food scene over there is just incredible. So you
Yeah.
really get that like that college town vibe in Ann Arbor, but the city vibe is really close. So concerts happen, food scenes. It's just a really good time, and it's a great place to be for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we chatted about this offline, but I grew up in Michigan. I grew up not too far from Ann Arbor. And I want to say, I agree with everything that you said. Ann Arbor at one point was one of the happiest cities in the country. I know it was voted that multiple times in a year. It's highly educated. Agree with the fact that the food is so great. There is, I think it's a Cuban, perhaps, burger joint in Ann Arbor that I can
Oh
obviously can't
yeah.
remember the name, but
Frito Petitos, yeah.
so good, so good.
So good.
And you're right. It's near Detroit. It's near a lot of other great suburbs. And another plus is you're not too far from the border to Canada. So in
No,
case
you
you
really
want
aren't.
to, yeah, you want to take the Ambassador Bridge up and through Canada, you can go explore a new country. But no, thank you for highlighting all those things. And my final question, and something is very repetitive, so our consistent listeners know that this question is coming. But, as you reflect upon your fellowship journey, navigating such a competitive time and a stressful time, what advice do you have? Or when you look back, is there something that you would change about your own application and interview cycle?
I wouldn't say that there's necessarily anything that I would change about my application cycle. A small piece of advice I would say is don't apply to too many places. I know that it can be a little overwhelming. But I had a mentor who told me, Trent, if you apply to more than 15 places, I'm going to fly to you and we're going to have a serious conversation.
Yeah,
And so that stuck with me. So I don't think that I think I applied to 15 places. But I think the big piece of advice that I have truly looking back is be kind to yourself. You are going through a stressful time. I remember it vividly. You are likely going to be told no, and it's hard. It's a hard thing to be told. So be kind to yourself at the end of the day. This might be a little repetitive, but everything truly happens for a reason. You will end up at the organization that truly you belong to. And that journey might take a little while. It might look nonlinear. So you have to be kind to yourself at the end of the day. After your interviews, de-stress in the way that you de-stress best. Take care of yourself. Do what you need to do to maintain your peace and to protect your peace. It's so important because, you can let the stress get the best of you, but again, like you have to be true to who you are, and that comes from being kind to yourself.
absolutely. What great advice. And I couldn't agree more, right? It's so easy to be hard on yourself when you get maybe a rejection email or you realize
Mhm.
that you might not be moving on to a final round. But I also would say that, the fellowship cycle is such a roller coaster. There were days where I would get like one, two, three rejections in a row. But
Mhm.
then that same night, someone would call me and say, "Hey, we
Yep.
want to invite you to a final round." So I think like sitting with your emotions, but also recognizing that like, yeah, there's going to be a lot happening in those like two,
Yeah.
3 weeks. So no, what great advice. I loved highlighting your journey, not only your graduate school experience, but I think the press ganey stuff is very, very cool. And then of course, Michigan medicine being such a great health system and such a, strong and well established program. I know that there will be people interested in applying, especially after listening to your episode. And so I just want to take a moment and thank you. Thanks for your time. I know it's significantly later there than it is where I am. And so I appreciate you staying on and really highlighting this incredible journey. And I know that as you move towards, the rest of this year and year two, you're going to do incredible things. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so fun. I really appreciate it.